Hey, David Bristow here with an episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Soundgarden. And of course, we're going to be talking about Chris Cornell and Kim Thail. And Soundgarden formed in Seattle, Washington in 1986, and definitely led the charge in the 90s with the grunge and alternative revolution. And I'll admit, I was a little late to the party. I kind of resisted, some of that initial alternative splash that hit the scene. But I did hear Alice in Chains pretty much first, Man in the Box. I heard that and I was like, what is this heavy, dark, kind of Hendrix solo, song or whatever. I was so confused by it. The video was dark, the song was dark. It did have that really killer, kind of Hendrix-inspired wah solo. But then I heard Pearl Jam and they kind of had some Hendrix, kind of things happening, Even Flow and Alive and some of those songs. Tool, I was immediately kind of drawn to Tool, the dark netherworld of all these visual images and heavy riffs. And then Soundgarden, definitely Chris, caught my attention first. I heard the vocals and I thought, who is the singer? He's killing it. And I didn't realize, how much he actually wrote as far as the guitar riffs and the songs and the music. I knew he wrote the lyrics and he sang, but I didn't realize until later that a lot of those songs that you heard from Soundgarden were written by Chris Cornell, guitar and vocals. Before Soundgarden, Chris was a member of Temple of the Dog, which had members of Pearl Jam, and that was definitely a very kind of early alternative, collaboration. And Pearl Jam kind of went their way, and Soundgarden kind of formed and went their way. But they did kind of meet in the middle for that album. And of course, Chris went on to also play with Audioslave, and he was the vocalist, basically with the musicians from Rage Against the Machine with Chris Cornell, as the front man. And that was a great band. Audioslave was great. But I did read somewhere to kind of sum up the sound of Soundgarden, which I really agreed with this kind of comparison. And I think it was like a review or a article, maybe in Rolling Stone or something like that. But the author basically wrote that it sounds like Led Zeppelin jamming with Black Sabbath, and then the Stooges and MC5 show up. And that really does kind of, define Soundgarden sound, because you hear the heavy Sabbath influence, the energy of Led Zeppelin, and then you have all that sludgy, heavy, kind of Stooges, MC5, and kind of a punk influence too. So it's like, metal and rock and punk all kind of mixed up together. And it's definitely a very infectious sound. Like when you hear it, it's like you either love it or you run away screaming, and you don't love it. But I've always liked Soundgarden. They just had, massive amounts of energy. And of course, Chris's vocals was just the icing on the top. All right, with the opening, that was Outshined from Bad Motorfinger, and definitely kind of an early, release from Soundgarden. One of the first songs I think I ever heard of theirs. And I also think this was one of the first songs I played in drop D that wasn't Unchained or Moby Dick. Unchained from Van Halen, Moby Dick from Led Zeppelin. And up until this moment, I just kind of thought of drop D as the Moby Dick tuning or the Unchained tuning. And then the next thing I knew, once the 90s hit and all these bands came out, it was like everybody was playing drop D. But I do remember where it was kind of unusual and kind of exotic. And then the next thing you knew, everybody was doing stuff like this. Just one finger power chords, D, F, and G. And then the good old, A flat, the flat 5 in there. So that part's really simple, you can play that with one finger. But I always liked the change, it kind of had almost like a progressive kind of sound to it. This part. And then you're just basically moving, to a D. And I love how the root note changes there, because you're going from D to a D over G. And then a D over F sharp. So after the D over F sharp, it's like a little piece of G6 to an F6. I guess you could also think of that as part of, C major and B flat major, but I'm thinking about more, based around G and F right there. stretch to reach up and grab that A too. But I love that chord part, you know, it's really cool. Kind of slide up in that octave right there, you know, that A to a B. Just right back to those one-finger power chords. All right, up next we have Fell on Black Days, which is from Superunknown, and it looks something like this. You can see we're actually bending chords, which is really cool to hear, you know, movement, whether it's from bending or vibrato too. And I've talked about that in other episodes of Chordplay, how I like hearing, you know, movement, whether it's bending or vibrato or obviously sliding too, when you're playing chords. So right there you can hear that E power chord move to a B, and then he just basically bends that B power chord about a half step. And you're just kind of making it, you know, go out of tune. You're not really bending it exactly a half step higher. You're just kind of smearing that chord. So right there it's an E power chord, that smeared B, and then it's like a little double stop there, you know, part of A major or A5. But that E over A right there, or A over E, I guess. And then a little piece of C right there, which they're just kind of moshing through that chord. So it's all partial chords, you know, 2 power chords, you know, part of a power chord right there and part of a C major right there. And at the very end, it's really crafty. It's kind of a C major 7 chord, and you're just playing the C and the E right there on the low E and the A string. Mute the D string and then allow the G, the B, and the high E to ring, you know, open right there, and you've got C major 7. Next we have the song Holy Water from Bad Motorfinger, and there's nothing holy about this song. It reminds me of Black Sabbath, and it sounds like this. Right there you can hear we're in drop B, so we're in standard tuning, and then just tune your low E string down to a B note, which is way down there. And that's how you're getting that really just, you know, mammoth sounding, you know, single note riff on the bottom. You know, from that low B tuning. But in the beginning, we're basically playing, you know, a double stop right there. You know, the A and the D on the D and the G string. And with the low B, that's basically a B minor 7 at first. And then the open A against that double stop changes it to A sus4. Something like that. And there you're just basically creating that just giant dinosaur sounding riff. And then the second time, so they're just kind of walking up the low E. And you're also kind of sliding that partial A to a partial B at the end. Love riffs like that. Up next we have the title track from Superunknown, and it looks like this. First thing I should talk about is the tuning. The tuning is very unusual. We're basically in drop D, so you're going to tune your low E down to a D, but then we're also dropping the A string down to a G. So if I move across the strings, we've got D, G, D, G, B, E, which is very strange. So it's drop D, but then you're also dropping that A string down to a G too. So you've got this. Really bizarre tuning. And then the very beginning you've got that kind of open G string, you know, hammer on pull off, and then you've got these two creepy chords. You know, there's a G sharp 9 and then an F sus2 flat 5, which is very bizarre. And then you hear it move, you know, drop down into a lower register, and you've got this. So that's just basically a G5 right there, and then you're moving over to an F6 sus2. You know, with the third fret held down there on the low E string with the open A and open D. You know, in this tuning, that's going to create F6 sus2. And then you hear it move up a little bit. You know, right there, you're going to move to the D string and play that hammer on pull off. And then right there, that's basically a C sus2 to a B flat 6. But I like how all three of those riffs are kind of based around the same idea. This one, and then this one, and then eventually, there's something cool about that mutual kind of connection between those different parts. Up next we have the very popular Black Hole Sun from Superunknown, and we're just in regular drop D tuning for this too. And we're not doing the bizarro, you know, kind of alter tunings for this one. Just standard kind of drop D tuning. And I'm also going to demonstrate this without the tremolo effect, because I know that's kind of a signature, you know, effect or sound for the song, but I want to demonstrate the chords and I don't want the effect to be a distraction. So we're not going to worry about the tremolo or, you know, kind of vibrato effect, but something like this. Basically the first part, you know, the intro, and we're going to look at the second half too when the verse starts. But as far as just the raw intro, you know, we're just in standard, you know, drop D tuning. So that's a G sus4 right there. And then right there, while you're keeping that 5th fret bar, you're going to grab this B flat, and that's going to change that to a B flat 6-9. So B flat 6-9 right there, which is unusual. And then you're going to move down here, and that's basically just an F5 or F5 power chord. And then right there, that's an E5 or just an E power chord, you know, but we're in drop D tuning. And then you're going to move just basically where you have the 1st fret barred. So that's an E flat sus4 right there. ends right there with D7, technically. You know, really crafty. I love the way that's put together. Signature guitar part, very famous guitar part. The first part of Black Hole Sun is where the tremolo and vibrato kind of, you know, give it that underwater sound. And it's, you know, in contrast to the intro, it's much higher on the fretboard too. It's way up here. Something like that. So that's a G6 technically with the G, you know, root note in the bass. And then G minor. And then right there that's F5. And then E minor. And then E flat major. And then a D sus4. And then the G6. And then right there, that's basically an F diminished 7, and then A flat major. So that's a really interesting, you know, progression or cycle of chords. Once you add the tremolo effect, then it sounds just like, you know, Black Hole Sun. The last example is from Burden in My Hand from the Down on the Upside album, and you can see I'm on acoustic guitar, and we're also in open C tuning. And I did feature this song in the I Love 90s Chords Chordplay, but I thought we could revisit this because it has this very, you know, kind of Zeppelin feel and sound, and it's just a cool song. It's like one of my favorite Soundgarden songs. Something like this. C, which is very unusual. So that's C, G, C, G, G, E. Something like that. And the chords are very interesting. So this is C major. And then you're going to basically keep that 5th fret on the A and bar the 3rd fret. You're also going to kind of target this 5th fret on the high E string too. And so that's basically C7 and C9. When you start playing with that. That part. And then it kind of flips on the fretboard in a way and goes to this. So that's basically a B flat major 7 sus2. And then right there just bar the 3rd fret all the way across and you have E flat major. And then you're going to basically do this. That's basically C and a C6 when you add the 2nd fret there on the G, B, and high E string. And that really gives it that Zeppelin kind of flavor. Basically, it's going to feel like you're playing a part of a B flat power chord right there, but that's E flat to F. And then right here, that's basically a G sus4 to G major, you know, in this tuning. If you feel like you're kind of trapped and you're playing the same, chords and progressions and the same things on guitar, check out altered tunings, open tunings like that, because it forces you to play completely different. And you might find some new chords or progressions or write a song. And I love playing around with altered, tunings and altered chords. That's going to wrap this look at the Chords of Soundgarden, and I'm definitely a fan, and Chris, rest in peace, Chris Cornell. I mean, great frontman, great vocalist, great songwriter. He kind of stepped out on his own after he left Soundgarden and started, some of his solo material. And there's just something, very special about him, for sure. And I know he's still remembered, and people still discuss his music and his vocals. And Soundgarden's just one of those, they're just a cool band. They had all this gritty energy and the Zeppelin, Sabbath kind of influence and some of the punk, and they had acoustic stuff and a lot of different layers and textures, in their music. So definitely a cool band to kind of remember and check out. And if you're already familiar with them, dive back in. If you haven't really heard very much from Soundgarden, jump in. They have some great stuff, Rusty Cage, and there's a ton of great songs from Soundgarden. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.